Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our latest live video. And as you can see on the screen, we're going to talk about the financial fog coming out of lockdown. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Anita Pickersgill. So thank you for joining us, Anita.
It's a pleasure.
So as usual with these events, we are on various different social media platforms. If anyone's got any questions or any comments as we're going through, please do put them in, and we'll try and answer them. But we're just going to kind of talk through, the financial fog and what's happened, and I guess hopefully speculate a little bit on what might happen as we move forward. So before we do that, Anita, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself and explain who you are, what you do, and the usual stuff?
Who am I? Well, my name's Anita, and I work with and for Thornbury Collection Services Limited. And yes, that makes me a debt collector, but I'm a nice one and an ethical one. And I have a niche in construction and subcontract, but I basically across the board, anywhere in the country. But a growing part of my daily work is helping educate business owners and support them in understanding why due diligence and credit management really is important and will be more so coming out of this situation for all of them, even micro businesses, because things have changed significantly and we've had to keep up with what we can and what we can't do as the goalposts have been moved. And as we've been saying, the can's been kicked further down the road every few months. So debt recovery is the main arm, but dispute resolution, increasing amounts of that, and obviously credit control and training. And that's it.
Yes, thank you, Anita. So I guess we kind of, before we look forward, we're going to look back a little bit. So how has the last kind of 15, 18 months been in your world? What's the effects, do you think, of what's gone on? It's been finance in the last 15 months has been an interesting area, hasn't it?
It has. It really has. It's been frustrating. Debt recovery, a lot of people assume it must have been really busy, but when thinking about it logically, construction has continued throughout. So there has always been cases in that area, but a lot of businesses simply mothballed and didn't do any turnover. So they weren't generating invoices to pay. Or there were quite a lot of business owners that, by definition of the fact they'd furloughed both their staff and potentially themselves, they weren't checking their emails and doing anything, literally, because I suppose technically under the rules, you're not supposed to be. And that meant that debt recovery in the B2B sense was not as prolific as the B2C being consumer, because throughout this, everybody sort of continued with the catalogs, the credit cards. So the B2C stuff has still carried on, but a lot of businesses haven't. And with the regulations that have been changed, the Corporate and Governance Act, the winding up petitions and statutory demands, and having to wait until the reviews each time. So you're almost like a dog at the tracks ready to go after the hare, and the hare goes flying past, and then they say, oh, no, not yet, you can't go. So you're still stuck on the traps waiting to go. And that's kind of how it's been for a while. And it is picking up slowly, but the biggest problem is we can't see accurately at the moment financial positions of businesses. There's this massive issue there. And it's always been historic data that predominantly people have worked on, but now even more so. And it's very difficult to assess whether a debtor, whether that be a sole trader or a company, actually can pay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? We're coming to a period now where people are filing accounts which will predominantly been over the pandemic period. And for a number of businesses, as you touched on earlier, essentially been mothballed. And it could be perfectly good businesses that just happen to have basically not traded for 6 months. So how do you work out if that's a good business or not?
Well, exactly. And not only that, I mean, There was concessions allowing people to extend the time for filing. And then the VAT deferrals, the CBILS loans, the bounce backs, the grants, the new restart loans. There's so much activity going on in respect of, say, government props, government aids, that some businesses will have taken this money and not used it. And it will just be there just in case, which is great. And they are not going to be worried about paying that back or starting to pay it back. But any businesses that have taken it and used it and are now faced with paying it back and they're opening up, the difficulty is, how do you know how many of your customers are still financially in a good place? And unless you have the ability, imagine yourself looking into the ocean. When you look on the surface, all you can see is the colour. But you have to go beneath the surface to actually see the whole beauty of that. And that's exactly what it's like with companies. Sole traders, it's always been difficult because you need their consent anyway. But companies, you can't see until those accounts are filed whether they have got deferred liabilities in there. And you still can't see what their projected turnover is likely to be, because they're not going to know that until we've been open maybe 3 to 6 months and we've got a couple of quarters in. So it's very difficult. And this is why those restrictions have been put in place by the government, as frustrating as they are. They're to give businesses that chance to rebuild their turnover and for us to see whether they actually are viable and whether it's a good bet for our clients that if they incur the costs of going through court or issuing a winding up petition, that they're going to actually get their money back. And that is a very big gamble right now. Very big. And that's why the restrictions were put there to stop that.
Yeah, so I guess they're kind of looking to what's going to happen. None of us have got a crystal ball. We now can't quite know. But how do you think maybe the next, probably best part of 18 months, the rest of this year and next year, we're going to look in your world, really? What's going to be the issues? What's going to happen? If you had your best guess.
Best guess, I think we now see more and more micro businesses about. We've seen a lot of startups. Now that could be people who have been furloughed, converting a hobby to a business. It could be people using their redundancy settlement. I think there will be more redundancies as the furlough scheme drops off and more micro businesses coming out of that, because perceivably a lot of people will see going on their own and being self-employed as more stable perhaps than taking a job. But equally, there's been a lot of limited companies set up as well. But I think there'll be a lot of failures because the COVID zombie is lurking in the swamp. And that's my analogy, because there's a lot of good businesses there that are just treading water, but they can only maintain their status by, for instance, paying the minimum amounts on their credit cards, and so that they're viable. But if they were asked to repay everything, they wouldn't be liquid. So, and there are the ones that literally can't be viable, and those will soon be exposed. But the ones that are treading water, I think they may find it difficult to secure funding because there'll be a reluctance possibly to lend where the lenders cannot see the accurate picture. And that, again, comes back down to the fog. Whether personal guarantees will be asked for more, I don't know. And in returns of debt recovery, I think we now are seeing a switch where businesses can go onto a pro forma model. That's great. But we all know if you have an economy that's existed on credit as ours has for a long time, if you suddenly pull the rug out, it's going to cause a lot of pressure points. So there's a lot of support out there. And breathing space is one of them. The moratoriums is another. And I'm hoping that businesses will take those up, because that will make it a less stressful model of the insolvency. And I think that may be the only way that some people are going to see their money come back. And I think we will be learning as we go along.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think just about every industry will be to an extent, I think, after as we come out of this. So I'm asking a question about, I kind of know what the answer is because I've spoken to you about this before, Anita. So how important is a good, strong, consistent credit process for a business?
It's the backbone. If you imagine a money spider in the middle of its web, you need a money spider in your business, because the web is what your business can be built within. And when that spider is in that web, that web is really strong. But as soon as you touch that web, it's going to go. And a number of business owners, they start out as a startup. They have a lot of support. And then when they get 3 years in, that support kind of dwindles off. Then they go into the main pool. It's a bit like when you've learned to swim and all of a sudden you're in this big pool and you think, oh, can I do it? And you start, and that's when the support isn't there and you have to go find out things for yourself. Now, at that point, a lot of business owners don't know the legal protocols that have to be followed. They don't know the difference between a limited company and a sole trader, and whether you can sue the directors. And a lot of assumptions are made, a lot of bad habits are developed. And the processes for credit management are essential. And once that process is in place, understanding it and adhering to it, so you have a cut-off point, so that if somebody hasn't paid and you've got everything in place, and you have to then go to a debt collector or money claims online, they have a much stronger chance of securing a payment or resolving the problem a lot quicker. And it's like, I once spent years ago, wallpaper in a room, and I felt really good when I'd finished because it looked great to me. And it wasn't until somebody came and said, you've done all the papering upside down, that I realized, okay. And that was a valuable lesson for me, because I'd actually paid for all that wallpaper myself. And it was out of my first wages, and I felt really good about it. And then obviously looking at it, and I thought, right, got to get it all redone now. So that was a costly lesson for me, one I can laugh about now, but at the time it was painful. And the same thing applies with business owners. One mistake can cost you your business, and in credit management, that can be a costly mistake.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, in that world, prevention is cheaper than the cure, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just geared up again, hasn't it? It's just educating business owners. And I think it's not in the toolkit when you first start out. You think of everything, but you think about where you're going to get your money from, you know, how you're going to brand your business, market your business, where you're going to get your customers from, your pricing, your HR and things like that. But you don't think about, what if I don't get paid? Can I prove my case in court? How much will it cost me? What happens if I get a dispute, especially now with so many businesses having goods delivered by couriers that don't get signatures anymore? So how do you prove that the photograph on the doorstep of someone's slippers with the box is actually the right house? It's very difficult.
No, absolutely. And it's an ever-changing world. And I guess it'd be interesting to know from your experience of kind of common mistakes that people make with the credit process. Because listening to the answer to the question, I probably make these mistakes, and other people as well. So it's always good to know that the kind of the most basic things that we can all do, maybe to improve what we do at the moment.
Well, the most basic error that I see on a regular basis is technically wrong invoices. And by that I mean, because we've got used to sending them by email, some people actually just put the email address where the customer's full name should be. And I cannot sue John Smith at abc.co.uk because that's not a legal entity.
Yeah.
And even if they'd put ABC Limited, which is a legal entity, but they haven't got the address, then I still can't use that invoice to put through court. You could risk it through money claims online because nobody polices it and checks it. But when you get to the point of the CCJ being awarded, and then some smart Alex says, oh, I want it set aside because it hasn't been done in line with process, then you're looking at additional costs. So there is a lot of mistakes that happen. But that's the most common one, or them not having an invoice number on,
Okay.
which is essential, or not covering off the sort of payment date and how to pay. Those are quite often missed off, and making an assumption that putting their terms and conditions on the invoice or the back of it is sufficient, and it's not. It serves as a reminder, but the terms have to be agreed before you do the work. So the invoice is just it's a tax document. It's a payment document. It's not the contract. So there's quite a lot of things, but those are the key ones. And disputes as well. Disputes that have gone on and on and on, and text messages going backwards and forwards. Some of them quite personal, some of them quite heated and very colourful. And of course, you don't think at the time that if you were to end up in court, those might actually be produced.
Yeah.
And it could be quite embarrassing if you brought other people into it and, you know, you were being forgive the expression, a bit of a Gordon Ramsay in there. So you might wish you'd done it better.
No, absolutely. Now, going back to the pandemic, I guess for many people and many businesses, it's been a reason why they've not been able to pay for something. But do you think that there's examples of people who've used it as an excuse?
Possibly. Quite frankly, yes. And that's the difficulty that we have, because we can't tell. And it is very difficult. You have no idea whether they do or they don't. You are relying on their honesty. You can check for debentures. You can look for existing CCJs. But you cannot actually look into the bank account. And it's very difficult. But there are people out there who use it as an excuse to a point. Certainly a delaying tactic, because if they know the legal process, then they will go right up to the end of it until they have to pay. A bit like we used to do with the red letter on the electric and gas bills. But we don't do that anymore, of course, because we all now use the apps and make payments that way. But and that's another good thing, because now we have the apps and the digital revolution going on. A lot of businesses lose out because they don't have all the different payment methods that people are looking for now. People don't. People assume, don't they? Now, oh, I can pay it online. I can do this. You must have an app, and well, actually, no, not everybody does.
I guess the simplest thing, isn't it? Make it as easy as possible for someone to pay you. That's kind of a very simple.
Well, yes, that's right, and make it as seamless, as painless, but capture all the information that you need at the start of the process. So if it does go wrong, you're not fishing around trying to think of how do I get hold of my customer.
No, that's great, Anita. Thank you. So, I'm sure there's people who at times will need to speak to you about what you do and how you can help improve their credit processes. So, where's the best places to look and speak to you and find out more about what you do?
Well, I'm always contactable through LinkedIn. Yep. We have a company page on there under Thornbury Collection Services. I'm under my own name on there. We also have a website as well, and my door is always open for an informal chat, discussion, messaging, and I'm there. You can always find me in the Northern Affinity too now, so that's good.
Absolutely, and I would personally say to anyone who's got any worries or thoughts about this, they want to look at what they do, Anita's a great sounding board, is a great starting point, and I know she, obviously the work she does, she can help you, but I know she'll also speak to you about this. Very passionate about the world that you live in, aren't you, Anita?
I am, yes. I am, and I can't help it, because with an insolvency background, I've seen so many businesses fail that just with a little bit of work before they got to that point would have been saved. And it's not a nice process to watch people go through, to be honest.
No. Well, no, thank you so much for the conversation. Really enjoyed it, Anita. And like I said, if anyone does want to get hold of Anita, she mentioned there, I'll post that LinkedIn and the website. But if you can't find, whatever reason, come to me as well at Northern Affinity, and we can pass on your details. So, yes, Anita, thank you very much for your time. It's really, really appreciated.
Thank you.